Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive here on forkandfry.com. Today, we're going to be tackling something that, might sound a little intimidating at first, but I promise you it is not venison tenderloin.
Oh, yeah.
Venison tenderloin. And, a lot of people, I think they hear venison and they just think, oh my gosh, that's like, super fancy gourmet cooking.
Right.
But we have a fantastic recipe that breaks it down and makes it so approachable and so easy and so delicious. And that's what our goal is today, is just to like really demystify it
Yeah.
and show you how you can make this really impressive meal without feeling like, you need to go to culinary school or something.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all about just kind of breaking down those barriers
Yeah.
and realizing that working with something like venison can be just as straightforward as, cooking chicken or anything else.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And I think, once you get the hang of it, you realize, oh my gosh, I can totally do this.
Mm-hmm.
So let's jump right in, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So step one, we're talking about prepping the venison tenderloin, right?
Mm.
You want to start with about a pound of venison tenderloin. That's going to be our star of the show here.
Right.
And one of the things that the recipe really emphasizes is patting it dry with some paper towels and getting it as dry as possible before you start seasoning it. And, sometimes we skip over those little details in recipes thinking, oh, that doesn't really matter. But in this case, it really does. Why is that so important?
Yeah. It's one of those things where it seems so basic, but it makes such a huge difference in the final outcome. And the reason for that is because we really want to get a good sear on the venison. And if there's excess moisture on the surface, it's just not going to sear properly.
Yeah.
It's going to kind of steam instead.
Right. It's not going to get to that, nice crispy brown,
Scrambled.
crust that we're looking for.
Exactly. And that crust is really where so much of the flavor develops. That's where we have that Maillard reaction happening, where the sugars and amino acids in the meat start to break down and create all those hundreds of flavor compounds.
Yeah, it's like magic in a pan.
It really is like a natural flavor factory right there on the surface.
Okay, so we've patted it dry.
Yep.
Now it's time to stand it up. And this is where we really want to get generous. The recipe says season generously. And I mean, don't be shy with the salt, freshly cracked black pepper, some beautiful fresh rosemary, some minced garlic. Just sprinkle it all over and then give it a nice little press just to kind of like make sure it's all, really in there.
Yeah, you want to make sure those seasonings are really making good contact with the meat so that they can really penetrate and infuse the flavor.
And do you think that helps with like that initial, kind of flavor base as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it really sets the stage for the whole dish.
Yeah.
It's not just about adding flavor to the surface. It's about creating that foundational layer of flavor that everything else is going to build upon.
I love that foundational flavor. I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
All right, so we've prepped the venison tenderloin. We've seasoned it up beautifully.
Okay.
Now we are moving on to step 2, which is searing it to perfection.
Oh, yeah.
So for this, you want to use a good heavy-bottomed pan, and a cast iron skillet is fantastic if you have one. Because it retains heat so well. But if not, any, heavy bottom pan that you have is going to do the trick. Add a couple tablespoons of olive oil, let that heat up. And now this is where, home cooks sometimes, we're like, okay, how do I know when the oil is actually ready?
Right.
Like, what's the visual cue that we're looking for?
So you want to look for the oil to start shimmering?
Shimmering, okay.
Yeah, when it kind of shimmers and moves around the pan really easily.
Yeah.
That's a good indication that it's hot enough to create that quick sear without burning the venison.
All right. And you want to hear that sizzle too, right when it hits the pan.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's
guess.
the sound of flavor developing right there.
Music to our ears.
Exactly.
Okay, so shimmering oil in the pan.
Okay.
We gently place the venison tenderloin in there. And now here's the important part. You want to resist the urge to like move it around right away. Just let it sit there and get nice and seared.
Yeah, you want to let it develop that crust undisturbed for about 2 to 3 minutes per side. You're looking for that really rich golden brown color all the way around.
And again, this searing stuff, it's not just about aesthetics, right? It's really doing a lot for the flavor as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that sear is where we develop those deeper layers of flavor. It creates that really nice textural contrast between the crispy exterior and the tender interior. And it also helps to seal in the natural juices of the meat, which keeps it moist and succulent.
Oh, we want all that juice.
Absolutely. Yeah, we want to keep all that flavor inside.
Okay, so we seared it to perfection. We're already feeling really good about this.
Right.
Now we move on to step 3, which is actually an optional step.
Okay.
Finishing it off in the oven. So this is if you want to have a little bit more control over, how well done you want your venison to be. If you're aiming for a nice medium rare, which is what the recipe on forkandfried.com suggests,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to transfer that skillet to a preheated 400-degree Fahrenheit oven and bake it for about 5 to 7 minutes.
Okay.
Now, what if I like my venison a little bit more on the well-done side?
Yeah, no problem. Oh, so if you prefer it a little more well done, you can just leave it in the oven for an additional 3 to 4 minutes.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's really that simple, and the oven's just going to kind of like gently cook it through.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a nice way to bring the center of the tenderloin up to your desired temperature without overcooking the outside.
I see. So you get that nice sear first, and then the oven just kind of finishes it off beautifully.
Ex-
All right, so whether you finish it in the oven or not, our next step 4, is all about letting that venison rest. And I know this is another one of those things that people are sometimes tempted to skip over because it smells so good.
Yeah.
You just want to dive right in. But why is it so important to let it rest?
Resting is crucial because when you cook meat, the heat causes the juices to move towards the center. And if you cut into it right away, all those juices are just going to run out onto your cutting board.
And we don't want that.
No, we don't want that.
We want them in the venison.
Exactly. So, by letting it rest for about 5 minutes, you give those juices a chance to redistribute throughout the meat.
So it's basically like the muscle fibers are relaxing and the juices are kind of like evening back out.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all about giving it time to kind of reabsorb that moisture and become more tender and flavorful.
So patience is a virtue in this step.
Absolutely.
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
We can do it.
Got this.
All right, 5 minutes are up. The venison is rested. We're ready to slice it. And the recipe specifically says to slice thinly against the grain. So why is that so important?
Yeah. So slicing against the grain basically shortens the muscle fibers, making the meat much more tender and easier to chew.
Okay, so it's like if you think about like a bundle of straws all lined up,
Mm-hmm.
you cut across them, you get shorter pieces.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're breaking down those long fibers.
Well, it's just easier to, eat and enjoy.
much more tender.
Makes sense. All right. So slice against the grain
Slice against the grain.
for maximum tenderness.
Absolutely.
Okay, now we are on to step 5. And this is where I think things get really exciting because we're adding a little bit of a butter and glaze situation. And this step is optional. But let's be real, who's going to skip this step?
Right. It sounds so good.
It sounds so good. So the recipe says melt 1 tablespoon of butter in the same pan that you cooked the venison in. And there's a reason for that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to use the same pan because it has all those delicious brown bits stuck to the bottom.
Oh, the fond.
Yes, the fond, exactly. And that fond is packed with flavor. So when you melt the butter in the pan, it helps to lift up those bits and create a really rich sauce.
So you're not wasting any of that like deliciousness that's left over.
Exactly. Yeah, you're capturing all that concentrated flavor.
Love it. And then we're adding a splash of balsamic vinegar into that melted butter to make a glaze. And I'm just imagining the combination of that buttery richness and the balsamic. It just sounds so good.
Yeah, it's a fantastic pairing. The balsamic adds a touch of sweetness and acidity that really complements the venison.
It's making me hungry just thinking about it.
I know, me too.
Okay, so we're almost there. We've
Yeah.
got our venison tenderloin beautifully sliced.
Yeah.
We've got our delicious butter balsamic glaze.
All right.
Step 6, serve and enjoy.
The best part.
And the recipe gives us some great suggestions for sides. You could do some creamy mashed potatoes, some roasted vegetables, maybe a nice simple salad. And they also suggest garnishing with a little sprig of fresh thyme just for that, little extra touch of elegance.
Yeah, it's all about those little touches that elevate the dish.
It really is. It really is. So, we've walked through this recipe step by step, and you can see it's really not that intimidating, right?
No, not at all.
And it's something that you can totally do at home. And I think what's so great about this recipe is it's not just for like special occasions,
Right.
You can make
Yeah.
this on a weeknight and feel like you're having, a fancy meal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's perfect for a weeknight dinner or a weekend gathering. It's versatile.
Exactly. And if you guys want to give this recipe a try, you can find the full step-by-step instructions with all the ingredient measurements and everything over on forkandfried.com. So head over there, check it out. And they even encourage you to like experiment a little bit, maybe try some different herbs or add a splash of red wine to that butter and balsamic glaze to kind of like personalize it and make it your own.
Once you've got the basic technique down,
Yeah.
you can really start to play around with different flavor combinations.
Exactly. So this is just kind of like your jumping off point, your foundation.
Your foundation.
Your venison tenderloin mastery.
There you go.
I like that.
So there you have it, guys. We've demystified venison tenderloin. We've shown you how easy it can be. We've
Yeah.
given you all the tips and tricks, and now we want to hear from you. Have you ever cooked venison before?
Hmm.
Are you planning to try this recipe?
We would love to know. Head over to forkandfry.com. Let us know in the comments. You can also share photos of your creations on social media. Use the hashtag #ForkandFryRecipes. We want to see what you're cooking up.
Yeah, and connect with us on our social media pages too. We love to see what you guys are making and hear your feedback.
Absolutely. So keep cooking, stay curious in the kitchen, and remember, life is too short for bland meals. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive.
See you then.
Bye.